In the south, the last weirwoods had been cut down or burned out 1,000 years ago, except on the Isle of Faces, where the green men kept their silent watch.
The Isle of Faces is, in my opinion, one of the most mysterious and interesting places in A Song of Ice and Fire. The island has been mentioned several times in the novels, and I believe that it will play some kind of a role in the future books. It is uncertain what that role might be, but it is possible to speculate based on what has been written about the Isle so far. The Isle of Faces is located in Westeros at the center of the God's Eye near Harrenhal. It is most well known for the pact that was sealed there between the First Men and the Children of the Forest. At the end of the Dawn Age, leaders from these two groups met on the island to form an agreement that would end generations of war that had been fought between them. The two races decided that the First Men would be given dominion over all of Westeros, save for the densely wooded areas, which would be given to the Children. In exchange, the First Men would cease their destruction of the weirwood trees, which the Children held as sacred. The pact was formed under the gaze of the weirwoods themselves, as they had all been carved with faces specifically for this meeting. Once the agreement was made, an order known as the Green Men was created to safeguard the Isle and its weirwood trees. Aside from this event, the Isle hasn't been mentioned too often in George R.R. Martin's works. However, it has come up a few times, and I think that it's possible to guess at what might happen there in future books based on these scarce references. More specifically, there is an underlying theme that seems to be present when the Isle of Faces is talked about. I'll tell you what that theme is later, but first I'll tell you when the Isle has come up in George's works. Firstly, the Isle has been connected to the breaking of the Broken Arm of Dorne. The Broken Arm of Dorne was a land bridge that used to connect Westeros and Essos during the Dawn Age. At some point during the war between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, the arm was broken and water covered the land mass, separating Westeros from Essos. In the world of Ice and Fire, which is written from the perspective of a maester, a couple of possibilities are laid out for how the arm was broken. One is that it became submerged over the course of many years due to natural geological causes. The other is that it was destroyed by the Children of the Forest. How? Legends say that the Children of the Forest sent their sorcerers, called Green Seers, to the island and that it was destroyed from there. According to this explanation, the Green Seers used blood magic to summon a powerful weapon called the Hammer of the Waters, which flooded the land bridge and cut off the First Men from traveling to Westeros. The Isle is mentioned briefly a few other times throughout Martin's works, but there are two references to it which are important. One is in a novella, separate from A Song of Ice and Fire, called The Princess and the Queen. This work recounts the events of the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war between two Targaryen factions that took place around 170 years before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. Like the world of Ice and Fire, this novella is written from the perspective of a maester. The mention of the Isle here is short but interesting. Archmaester Gildain, the fictional author, wrote that Adam Valerion, a bastard with Targaryen blood, sought to retake a town in the Reach called Tumbleton from the rival Targaryen faction known as the Greens. According to Gildain, singers had said that Valerion traveled to the Isle of Faces to take counsel with the Green Men before attempting to take Tumbleton. If true, the Green Men proved to be helpful, as Adam Valerion's force managed to retake Tumbleton, even though this came at the cost of his own life. The other notable reference to the Isle occurs in A Storm of Swords in Bran's second chapter. Here, Mira Reed tells the story of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who rode as a mystery knight in the Tournament of Harrenhal. In this story, we hear of a Crannog man who traveled to the Isle of Faces and stayed there with the Green Men for a winter. We later hear of how the same Crannog man travels to Harrenhal and is bullied by 3 squires and saved by a she-wolf. Days later, the Mystery Knight appears at the tournament and defeats the knights of the 3 squires, before disappearing soon after. Who were these people in the story? My own opinion is that both the Crannog Man and the Mystery Knight are Howland Reed, Mira Reed's father. The she-wolf is Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's sister. Many people see this story as important because it illuminates details about the tournament at Harrenhal. The tournament, in turn, is important because it is likely where the events that sparked Robert's rebellion took place. But something else that this story makes prominent is the Isle of Faces. Before the Mystery Knight competes in the tournament in order to teach the squires a lesson, we are given this passage.
Amidst all this merriment, the little crannock man spied the 3 squires who'd attacked him. One served a pitchfork knight, one a porcupine, whilst the last attended a knight with 2 towers on his surcoat, a sigil all crannock men know well. "The phrase," said Bran, "the phrase of the crossing." "Then as now," she agreed. The wolf maid saw them too and pointed them out to her brothers. "I could find you a horse and some armour that might fit," the pup offered. The little crannock man thanked him, but gave no answer. His heart was torn. Crannock men are smaller than most, but just as proud. The lad was no knight, no more than any of his people. We sit about more often than a horse, and our hands are made for oars, not lances. Much as he wished to have his vengeance, he feared he would only make a fool of himself and shame his people. The quiet wolf had offered the little crannock man a place in his tent at night, but before he slept, he knelt on the lake shore, looking across the water to where the Isle of Faces would be, and said a prayer to the old gods of North and Neck.
The thing to note here is that Howland Reed, if indeed he was the Mystery Knight, was able to become strong enough to beat seasoned warriors after praying to the old gods. And this brings me back to the central theme that underlies all of these stories about the Isle of Faces. They all show that, somehow, the Isle seems to be magical, and it seems to be able to grant powers to people when they ask for it. Whether it was the Green Seers during the Dawn Age War, or Adam Valerion or Howland Reed, all of the people who went to the island for aid received it. And this is how I think the Isle of Faces is going to come into play in the future of Song of Ice and Fire books. One of the main theories that people have put forward about the Isle of Faces is that Rhaegar and Lyanna were either married there or traveled there shortly after their wedding. The evidence for this comes from a quote in the World of Ice and Fire stating that Rhaegar and his companions took Lyanna and the Riverlands near Harrenhal. If this theory were true, then the events preceding Robert's rebellion could be easily revealed by Bran, who can see through the eyes of the weirwoods on the Isle. Additionally, the popular Rhaegar plus Lyanna equals Jon theory could potentially be verified in this way, assuming that it's true. This is possible, but I think the Isle will play another role. I think that someone, or a group of people, will need to travel to the island for aid. As we have seen already, those who travel to the island are able to receive aid through magic, and I think that this is what will happen later in the novels. I'm hesitant to speculate on who will need to receive this power or for what purpose. Perhaps it will be that the green men on the island will help fight against the others, or perhaps Brienne, the Brotherhood Without Banners, or someone else in the Riverlands will travel there. Howland Reed might also become involved somehow. I can only guess at these things, but I'm fairly confident that the powers of the Isle of Faces will be further explained in the later books, and I'm quite sure that they will be used by someone.